Hello, everybody. This is MP Damien Couric here. Thanks so much to everyone who has joined into what is my first Zoom webinar. So thanks for your patience. I know there were a couple of you that had logged in right at the beginning and a few technical difficulties. So I will give you a fair warning. This is the first Zoom town hall I've done. I've done a number of Facebook town halls, as many of you know. However, not everybody has Facebook. So I wanted to ensure that as many people as possible could that I could reach out to, especially in the challenging times that that we are facing as a region, as a province, and as a country. So this is a attempt to ensure that we can. Or that I can connect with as many constituents as possible. So thank you to all of you that are on the call, and we're working at getting it streaming on Facebook as well, so that as many folks as possible can watch this. So looking forward to answering some questions, and I do have a number of questions that folks had either commented or sent in over the last number of days, but wanted to give you a quick update from the capital. I'm in Ottawa, and it's been a busy day. In fact, I spent just finished 3 hours at committee. I'm a member of the Standing Committee on Public Safety, and that committee is responsible for many of the restrictions at our borders, including what I would call the Liberals' hotel quarantine debacle. And it is certainly very frustrating as we see some of the just challenges. In fact, when the minister was asked earlier today about the evidence that they made these decisions on, they simply wouldn't provide it. So Conservatives are hard at work getting answers, and it's important for the sake of Canadians. You know, we ask simple questions about are Canadians informed of their rights? What basis, in terms of evidence, in terms of ensuring that folks' rights and freedoms are respected, that this is actually a measure that helps public health. We don't know because the government won't provide the evidence, and it's very, very troubling that is in fact the case. So, like I said, just wrapped up 3 hours of committee on that. And if you're interested, those of you on Facebook, I did share Shadow Minister of Public Safety Shannon Stubbs streamed the entire committee meeting on her Facebook page, and I shared that a little bit earlier. When it comes to Parliament, we've been very, very busy. There's a whole barrage of bills that have been coming forward. In fact, it's been very, very interesting with some of the topics. You know, I wrote down a few of note. Bill C7, medical assistance in dying, which somebody asked a question on, so I won't talk about that right now, but I will get to that. Bill C19, which proposes some changes to the Elections Act. Bill C21 and 22. That's the changes to firearms rules, and then the Justice Bill that actually lessens penalties for the real criminals. Bill C24, which is actually something that Conservatives suggested months ago, saying we need to ensure that those who are depending on COVID programs can continue to access them. The Liberals just introduced that here a few days ago, and we're debating that now, as well as a whole bunch of private members' bills. Many of you will be aware we had a big victory here a couple of weeks ago when the second reading, for those of you who know how Parliament works, there's always multiple votes and committee that evaluate and scrutinize legislation, an important process to make sure that democracy and that ultimately your views are brought forward in Canada's Parliament. And there was a private member's bill that passed a couple of weeks ago. The first step in the process, so it's not law yet, but passed the first significant hurdle, was to exempt agricultural fuels, some agricultural fuels, from the carbon tax. Big win. Now, Conservatives don't want to stop there. I know there's been some crazy rumors that somehow Conservatives are not actually wanting to get rid of the carbon tax. I think that's the Liberals leaking that sort of thing. I'll tell you, Conservatives are focused on ensuring that we have an environmental plan first that works for Canadians, and second, that does not punish the very Canadians that are simply living their lives, and especially us in rural, disproportionately affects that. Anyway, I could go on about that. Second victory is John Barlow, a Conservative MP from Southern Alberta, had a bill pass again, second reading, so that's step one. A bill that will ensure that there is enforcement mechanisms for people that would try to break into a farm, like we saw in a turkey barn in Southern Alberta, where protesters broke in and actually could have caused great harm to the animals and certainly the livelihoods of the farmers. So John Barlow's bill actually amends certain aspects of some laws to ensure that there are enforcement mechanisms to protect landowners. It doesn't stop people from protesting. That's a fundamental right. We need to remember that. But it does ensure that that if people are going to put animals, put farmers in harm's way, that there's enforcement mechanisms. So again, although there's a lot of frustrations, certainly I'm frustrated with a lot of the actions of the current Liberal government. There is these little glimmers of hope where we can see small victories in the midst of some of the challenges we face. So that's a little bit of a snapshot. Happy to dig into as many questions about different things as possible. And then I've been busy in the constituency as well. A lot of these Zoom meetings. This is my first Zoom webinar, which is a little bit different. And I see there's about 20 people on, so that's good. I wasn't sure how many people to expect, so appreciate everybody that is tuned in. And we'll try to do this again, and as well try to talk about, I'll have some Zoom webinar, town hall type events that where we can talk about a particular issue, and I can ensure that maybe a colleague comes on and addresses a number of things that Conservatives are doing across the country. But this is the test run, so appreciate all of you joining here today. But when it comes to being busy in the constituency, a lot of Zoom meetings, not Zoom town halls, but Zoom meetings with people. And I know I recognize a couple of names actually on the call that I've had some Zoom meetings with. So thank you to those individuals, and then just doing everything I can to connect with people in this COVID environment, and then trying to get out where possible too. In fact, I've been able to tour a few businesses, some very, very cool Alberta success stories that have been able to persevere through the midst of the economic challenges, and really the leading edge of technology, innovation, and serving, providing services to our communities. So it's been great to be able to get out a little bit as restrictions start to be lessened in Alberta. And then that's so I wanted to provide a little bit of a report. So that's that was that portion of the agenda. Now I want to get into your questions. So thank you to those of you who were able to send some questions in beforehand. Really appreciate that. And then I see there's one question that's come in the chat, and feel free, if you have a question that you haven't sent in yet, feel free to there's the Q&A button. You can type in your question, and I think there's a chat function as well. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but like I said, this is a bit of a learning experience, so appreciate all of you joining in on that. So a couple of questions from Jill from Provost. So first is offer more information about the possibility of Alberta operating its own pension fund as opposed to the current CPP. Now, all of you are likely familiar with CPP, and it is a joint national program that many Canadians from every province, with the exception of Quebec, they pay into, and then there's a formula when you turn 65 or age 60, depends on when you want to take those benefits, and that's paid into fund that's worth somewhere close to half $500 billion, and is a significant source of people's retirement savings. So I know I've heard from a lot of people that are concerned about the talk about an Alberta pension plan and whatnot. So let me provide a little bit of context. And I think this will be important for some of the further questions that I've been asked about national unity, Western alienation, and even those who are asking whether or not Alberta should separate. So the very foundation of our country is governed by a number of things. And the basis of it is by the Constitution. The Constitution is very clear in who has authority to do what. So the federal government has certain authorities that Canada's Parliament, the House of Commons, and the Senate, the buildings that are just next door to where my office is here today, and it is. And sorry, next time I need to remember to mute my email. So I apologize about if you can hear some emails coming in the background. So there's federal jurisdiction, and then the Constitution outlines certain areas of provincial jurisdiction, and then provinces outline certain areas of municipal jurisdiction. And it's important to understand that separation of different levels of government, because that's really at the core of many of the practical initiatives. I know the provincial government in Alberta has brought forward the Fair Deal panel. In fact, I attended a number of those events, and I hear a lot about the frustration that Albertans have. So specifically with the CPP, basically all the provinces, with the exception of Quebec, decided to get together and have a national pension plan where they would pay into. It would be managed, and in this case, it's managed by something called the CPPIB. It's an investment board that basically makes sure that the dollars you pay into it are not just paid back out, but it's like a traditional pension plan where there's an actual fund that's invested and grows, hopefully grows over time, and they have a pretty good track record at seeing growth. But one of the frustrations is that because of Albertans, generally higher level of income, is that Albertans pay generally more into CPP than they get out. So the provincial government has started the conversation about whether or not they should remain part of the Canada Pension Plan. So if Alberta was to choose to get out of the Canada Pension Plan, that is the province's right to do so. Now, there is a formula and a structure to do on how that would happen. So all of that's the details. The key here, and one of the biggest solutions, I think, to the national unity issue, is ensuring that provinces have the ability to make decisions that work best for them. Now, in the case of any decision related to the Canada Pension Plan, that will be something that the provincial government has said Albertans will get to choose. So it won't be up to the legislature, it won't be up to the Parliament of Canada, it'll be up to Albertans to actually make that decision. And to be honest, personally, as I look at some of the evidence, there are some benefits to the current CPP, and then there are some benefits possibly to an Alberta pension plan. But ultimately, and this is key, and this is one of those core philosophical parts of which I take very, very seriously. This is Albertans' money we're talking about. So that needs to be respected. And because it's Albertans' money, Albertans need to be able to make that choice. So certainly I've talked to a number of MLAs about this, and I know they want to hear from Albertans. So there will be a number of times where I encourage you to reach out to share your perspectives with your local MLAs. It's not because I don't care about those issues. In fact, as somebody who's pretty passionate about politics, I care deeply about a lot of those issues, but I respect the fact that it's a different level of government that is responsible for those things. So Jill also asks, when it comes to Alberta's interests, they often coincide with generating wealth and a high standard of living across Canada, but Alberta is often treated as an afterthought by federal governments. and when it comes to representation, is often overwhelmed by giant populations in Ontario and Quebec. I hear you. Alberta has had a oversized contribution into Canada, and it's an issue that we need to take very, very seriously. And it's something that I attempt to communicate with MPs, both Conservative, but also from all parties, to talk about how Alberta contributes to Canada. And nothing frustrates me more when I hear a Bloc Québécois member of Parliament who will tell Alberta that we shouldn't be producing our oil. It is unbelievably frustrating that would be the case. So I hear that frustration. I hear it every day from Albertans that are questioning, and it breaks my heart. I'm a proud Canadian and I'm a proud Albertan, and those things should not be mutually exclusive. And folks, it is absolutely essential that we fight to stand up for Canada as it was intended to be, because the reality is that Canada was built on the understanding that regions were best suited to make decisions for themselves. Now, Canada's government, and I'm going to get a little bit technical here, so I hope that's okay. Canada's government is similar in structure to the United Kingdom, with a big difference. That big difference is that unlike the United Kingdom, where they have a House of Commons, and there it's a House of Lords, not a Senate, but here in Canada, we have a system of regional governments called provinces. And there's 10 provinces and then 3 territories as well, although they're governed similar in structure, a little bit different in terms of jurisdiction. But the key is that the national government in Ottawa needs to respect provinces. Quebec is different than Alberta. Prince Edward Island is different than BC. Saskatchewan is different than Nova Scotia. I could go on and on and on. The most frustrating thing, and what comes down to the core of, I think, a lot of the frustration, is that we see that a national government in Ottawa with the Trudeau Liberals, they do not respect regions. They would rather pit region against region for political benefit. You know, I've shared this before. I think one of the legacies of Stephen Harper that Conservatives should be proud of is that there was a understanding, a real understanding, that you may not agree, the national government may not agree with a province. And there was a time where the majority of provinces across Canada were not Conservative premiers, yet Stephen Harper was willing to work with them. And that's one of the biggest frustrations that I have with the Trudeau Liberals, is they seem so ideologically driven that they're unable to work with their with those who they disagree with. And that is the antithesis of what Canada was supposed to be. When Canada was first founded, it was, quite frankly, a compromise. You had a large French population and a large English population, and they had 2 very, very different perspectives on how they should be governed. So a national government understood both 2 things. Understood what they needed to be responsible for, things like the military, diplomacy, infrastructure projects of national interest like the railway. But they also, and this is key, and this is what I think Liberals forget, a government needs to understand where they should not be responsible, or where they should devolve or give that authority to other jurisdictions, in this case, specifically provinces. And that's what's unfortunate. The carbon tax is a great example. If a province wants to have a carbon tax, like British Columbia, the people of British Columbia voted in successive governments that have a carbon tax. You know what? I may disagree with it. I may think that it's not good public policy, but you know what? The people of BC made that decision, and I will respect that. Respectfully disagree, but respect that nonetheless. The problem is that we have a Liberal government that basically says you can't have your own opinion as a province. So Alberta, Ontario, you cannot have your own opinion. So they impose a carbon tax, and it creates a level of distrust and dissension that is very, very troubling. And it's, quite frankly, tearing our country apart. And I'll tell you, there's troubling trends of division, not just East and West, not just Alberta and the rest of the country, but there are are levels of division that go rich and poor, pitting rich and poor against each other, is not right. We are all Canadians, and we all need to have access to opportunities, rural and urban. There's a lot of issues where, as a rural member of parliament or an MP that represents largely a rural constituency, 53,000 kilometers of East Central Alberta, it's frustrating that often policy decisions don't take into account that much of Canada, even though it may not be a significant portion of the population, but much of Canada lives in rural areas. And rural areas, you talk about Alberta giving a oversized contribution to the national economy. Rural does too. You look at our resources, you look at agriculture. Rural is a driving force behind Canada's success, and we should celebrate those things. We should not limit opportunity. We should build them. So hopefully, Jill, that answers those questions. Oh, and she does have one more question. What might Alberta do within Confederation to operate more independently, much like Quebec has over the last number of decades? Well, it's interesting. This goes back to what I talked about when I first started this conversation. The Constitution gives Alberta a lot of tools to use. Things simple like appointing its own chief firearms officer, which the provincial government in Alberta has taken steps to do. There's other tools, a whole myriad of tools that exist that Alberta can assert its autonomy. And I know that Albertans feel, because I share many of those feelings, but they feel that in order to get respect, we have to assert some aspects of those autonomies to ensure that we get things like pipelines, and which is especially relevant now as there's some complications with the cancellation of Keystone XL and even Line 5, which affects Ontario. So it's interesting that they're starting to feel the anti-energy pain when it affects 50,000 jobs in Ontario. But there are a whole bunch of constitutional mechanisms that provinces have been given because the framers of our Constitution developed and wanted to ensure that regions would be respected. And there's no higher law in the land than the Constitution. So a lot of those tools exist. And my advice to MLAs and a lot of those who are frustrated with the status of the Federation is, first, separation is not the answer. There's many reasons for that, and maybe at some point we can talk more fulsomely about that. I do not believe separation is the answer. I believe we have a strong, proud history as Canada, and Alberta is a big part of that. And we should be proud of that as Canadians, like I said before. Proud Canadians, proud Albertans, those things can and should be together. But that doesn't disqualify Alberta from being able to make decisions that are in its own regional best interest. And the province, the provincial government can make those decisions. And I will support and respect, even if I don't agree on every one of those questions, but I will respect the fact that a different level of government made those decisions. So hopefully that's helpful in getting that. So next question, Lacey from Drumheller asks, as a representative of a rural constituency, you have the privilege of seeing firsthand how policies put into place by provincial and federal governments impact rural municipality and residents differently than those in urban centers. Do you feel some of these policies, such as the Liberals' change to firearms laws, provincial COVID-19 response, which target urban-centric issues, are unfair and unnecessary for rural localities? Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink here. So great question. And then there's with both issues, the majority of firearms complaints and concerns and the majority of COVID cases have been concentrated in larger urban centers and have had less impact on rural areas, including in Battle River Crowfoot. Would a more regional approach be more effective and beneficial and keep Alberta and other Western provinces from feeling alienated? So lots of Western alienation questions. So So yeah, there is a great deal of frustration that I have in terms of and I mentioned this before, some of those, the rural urban divide that exists. In fact, one of the things that I talked a lot about during the election was the idea of ensuring that there's a rural lens applied to public policy. And a hypothetical example is if a government, and it doesn't matter which level of government, says, okay, there's a certain amount of money, say $1 billion, just as an example. Cities, large centers, will have teams of accountants and lawyers that can go through and put together complicated applications, environmental assessments and reviews, and all of those details, and ask for a big portion of money, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. That's fine. There's a lot of people that live in urban centers, but what a rural lens to public policy is ensuring that those funding envelopes, so take this hypothetical $1 billion, maybe it's for something like infrastructure, and ensuring that there's a proportion that is set aside for and not just set aside for rural, but that a small town like the town that I grew up in, Consort, Hammond, Drumheller, even Camrose. Camrose is officially a city, but when most people hear, what the population of Camrose is, it's about 20,000, and that's a small jurisdiction compared to even larger cities within the province of Alberta. To make sure that the application processes and that the criteria for these grants and whatnot do not disqualify rural and smaller centers simply by often bureaucratic means. So very, very important. Now, when it comes to the COVID-19 response, a lot of this has been, and especially with the restrictions, a lot of this is the provincial government. And let me tell you, provincial governments are in an incredibly difficult spot. And I have the unique opportunity, because I'm your representative, and I felt that it's been important that I'm still able to be in Ottawa as much as possible, to participate in debates and whatnot. But it's been very I've seen, both in terms of talking to colleagues from across the country and the fact that I'm in Ottawa right now. I've seen how different provinces have had to manage COVID and the effects. And certainly I think there is a difference between rural and urban. In fact, people will often share how, a farmer is socially distanced by nature. When you live 6 miles from your nearest neighbor, there are differences. So and this is not to pivot away from the question, but Lacey and others on the call who would have concerns about the provincial guidelines, and I know there's been some changes. In fact, I think there were some changes just announced a couple of days ago. But talk to your MLAs about that and share with them your concerns, your thoughts on these matters, because it's important that they do hear from you, and to ensure that rural voice doesn't get lost in the midst of it all. Now, I haven't forgot about firearms, and Lacey, thank you for asking about that. Absolutely, and there's a massive divide, and it is shameful, quite frankly. The Liberals would use firearms as a political tool to divide Canadians. That's why they're doing this. It has nothing to do with public safety, and I'll get into that in a moment. But they are using this as a political ploy to garner support from jurisdictions that deal with crime, often gun crime. So they come out and with a policy saying they're going to ban, something like, and I'm quoting what the Liberals say now, military-style assault rifles. That's what they'll call them. Well, I've asked the Minister of Public Safety myself and said, so tell me what a military-style assault rifle is. And they'll have this long, convoluted explanation about, this, that, or the other thing, and it's meant to that it's those that are meant for the battlefield and whatnot. And then, but it's clear that they don't actually understand the reality of what many rural people, and I'm a PAL holder and a firearm owner myself, so I understand these things. But it is frustrating that there's that disconnect. So instead of actually dealing with the issue, more than 90% of gun crimes in Canada are committed with illegally smuggled guns. That's the real problem. And it's frustrating that the Liberals, while they talk about supposedly dealing with guns, they're actually lessening penalties in many cases for serious gun crimes. And only a little over a month ago, the Liberals actually voted against a Conservative private members bill that would have increased penalties for anyone who committed a crime with a smuggled firearm. The Liberals voted against that. Yet they think that taking a firearm away from a hunter, a sports shooter, or a farmer is going to solve public safety issues. They could not be more wrong. Certainly this demonstrates that rural divide. And honestly, I think the Liberals know that, but they're playing politics to try and get votes and to try and get that coveted majority government. So be happy to answer more questions on gun issues, but I do see that the time is going quickly, and I want to try to get to all of the questions. So thanks very much. So question from Jackie about MP raises. Thanks, Jackie, for asking this question. MPs received a raise last year. I was very disappointed about that. At a time when many Canadians were suffering, there was an automatic legislated pay raise. So it was not something that I voted for. This has been in place for many, many years. And it's actually tied to a formula that was passed into legislation more than a decade ago. I looked into the specifics last year, and I apologize, I don't remember the specifics. But MPs are slated to get a pay raise again at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is April 1st. Now it's a sad joke. Unfortunately, it's not an April Fool's joke. MPs will actually get a raise at a time when Canadians are suffering, and certainly last year, and I will again this year, call for a freeze of MP salaries. I think that that's only fair, and it's reasonable that MPs demonstrate that we can lead when there is these challenging times that Canadians are facing. Now, many MPs won't agree with me, and that's okay. So I can't do anything about that myself. So what I did last time is I committed to ensuring that I donated what that pay raise would have been or is to local organizations in our communities. And that's not to boast or brag. It's just a way that I can ensure that what I think is unfortunate. When Stephen Harper was Prime Minister back in 2008 with the financial crisis, they froze MP salaries for a number of years, and I think that would be appropriate again. But I can't change that myself, so I've made that decision as your member of Parliament out of respect for taxpayers. Okay, so. Can I talk about the allegations of threatening a whistleblower in the military? Yeah, so if any of you followed question period today, absolutely astounding revelations over the last number of days between question period and committee about a cover-up of sexual misconduct within Canada's military. And this is tragic. I believe that the military needs to be honored and respected, and the men and women in it need to be protected and be safe, especially there has to be accountability for these women who faced sexual misconduct, and it is unbelievably frustrating. We're seeing there was cover-ups, what is alleged to have taken place at the highest level, including the fact that one brave woman, and for any woman who has faced sexual abuse or misconduct, it is a difficult thing often for them to go public about that, and for there to be threats. And what's alleged is that there were threats to this individual who came forward to try and bring awareness to this. That is absolutely tragic. And Conservatives are working diligently to try to get some answers to this, some accountability. There's been a number of high-ranking officers in the military that have taken leave, stepped down, and it's key that we get answers so that we can restore trust for our brave women and men in uniform, that they can trust the fact that they will have a safe place to work, that they, as they serve our country and deserve the utmost respect for wearing our nation's flag on their shoulder, they deserve nothing less than being protected from facing threats within. Lots more to come on that. Honestly, we're finding out more details each and every day. It turns out now the Prime Minister, I believe it was last week, said he didn't know anything about it. His office didn't know anything about it. Well, today in question period, it was revealed that his office was informed. And then there's just a whole bunch of, that opens up a whole bunch of further questions. And it's shameful that that there seems to be this mentality of hunkering down and trying to cover up this misconduct, especially when it is the height of hypocrisy from a so-called self-ascribed feminist prime minister that is covering up this sort of thing. Lots more to come on that, and stay tuned as Conservatives try to get answers and for those who have faced something that no woman, no person should ever face. Okay, so a little bit about the trade. Can you talk a little bit about the trade agreement between the UK and Canada, and what Bill C-18 means for Canada? So actually, the speech on this last night, it was great to be able to debate something like free trade. When I talked earlier about different jurisdictions, international trade, a key responsibility of the federal government, and was proud to offer my support for basically the extension of the CETA provisions, the European Free Trade Agreement that was signed back in 2015. Now, what's interesting is that that agreement was mostly negotiated by Stephen Harper. And although there was some challenges, the ink on the paper is by the Liberals, mostly negotiated by the previous Conservative government. And in fact, if you remember back to 2015, early 2016, they almost dropped the ball. And there was walking out of negotiations and a few other things. That's a whole other story. But a proud legacy that although not a perfect agreement, this is important for our fifth largest trading partner. That's what the UK is to Canada. A lot of manufactured imports and exports. We share a lot of history, we share a legal system. So there's a lot of reasons why that trading relationship is so important, and it has a significant impact. And had this agreement not been reached at the 11th hour, and this is what's frustrating, the Liberals negotiations broke down back in about a year and a half ago, and it's frustrating that this new negotiation, which had to be brought into effect prior to the end of or prior to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, that was the end of 2020. There had to be a whole bunch of other steps, unnecessary steps, quite frankly, had the Liberals taken seriously the fact that you need to be proactive about some of these things. So although there's some frustrating elements of this, basically the CETA, the former European trade provisions are being replicated into the United Kingdom, and then within 3 years. And although there's some issues around the specifics of that, but Canada will continue to negotiate with the United Kingdom and hopefully provide more opportunities for Canadians. It'd be great. And I know Aaron O'Toole has talked a lot about CANZA, which is an acronym for increasing trade and diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. We're all very similar countries. We share our democratic systems. We all have a high quality of life, advanced economies, and there's a lot of opportunity there. And it's unfortunate that the Liberals haven't taken advantage of it. But now, get a little bit political here, is that when Conservatives have the opportunity to form government, this is the sort of thing that we will get to work on ensuring that there are opportunities for Canadians. Okay, so that's a little bit about that. Voted for that today. It passed the House of Commons and is now on its way to the Senate. And I've talked to some senators. They'll be debating that in the coming weeks. And it's important that it is passed by the end of March. And it looks like that should be the case. So that is a good thing for Canada's overall economy. Bill C7, medical assistance and in dying, also known as assisted suicide or euthanasia. Look, at any issue like this, it evokes deep emotions. And I've heard from people on all sides of this debate. Now, I believe that Bill C7 is a dangerous bill. It removes important safeguards that were brought into place to ensure that those who could be taken advantage of were protected. And Bill C7 eliminates a lot of those protections. I'm opposed to MAID generally, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, from my faith perspective and the value that I put on the dignity of life and people, and it's important for me to emphasize that. But Bill C7 takes what is a discussion around a court case that was decided in Quebec, and really the Liberals mismanaged a lot of aspects of that as well. And I did a couple of speeches on this, but basically it goes way further than what the court actually asked the government to do. And it's unfortunate because it seems like the current Justice Minister is just intent on making it not just medical assistance in dying, but medically assisted death. And one of the most troubling things is that it went through the Senate, and the Senate made some further amendments where it includes a provision that will include mental illness being the sole reason for being able to request at any age, the sole reason for being able to ask for medically assisted death. And I think that's a dangerous precedent, folks. I believe that we should be, as we promote mental health, whether it's things like Bell Let's Talk Day. I was proud to support the creation of a mental health crisis line, being able to dial 988 to ensure that folks have access to mental health resources. And it is an absolute shame that this expansion of something that was mandated by the courts has just been taken way too far. And I'd encourage you. I've shared some. I shared a video that my colleague Garnet Genuous, who's an MP from Sherwood Park, that he put together, that talks about how we need to give hope, not take away life. And there's been a ton of work done to try and bring these issues to light. And the frustrating thing here, folks, is that we've been bringing these issues to light, and as we talk about them, the Liberals started facing some serious pressure. Disability rights advocacy groups, faith organizations, even Liberal MPs started saying, "Whoa, we need to stop. This is the wrong direction for our country." Yet the Justice Minister comes out and blames Conservatives for being, obstructionist or just wanting to hold up the legislation, when Conservatives are saying, look at this legislation, regardless of what your opinion is on it. And that's key in democracy. Regardless of what your opinion is on the matter, we need to be able to discuss it and debate it and to bring issues to light. It's obvious the Liberals don't care about that. They don't care about the debate and the dialogue. And especially, I think, on this issue, they're starting to feel the pressure. In fact, there was a Liberal MP who was a physician that outlined to a national newspaper some of his very articulate concerns. Jody Wilson-Raybould, when she was Justice Minister and brought in some of these initial changes that the current Justice Minister voted against, she was opposed to it as well. So there's a whole bunch of concerns here, and it is very, very concerning, the precedent that's being set, and a slippery slope. When this was being debated, and although I wasn't elected, I followed the debate closely. There were Liberals that would say, "Don't worry, these sorts of things will never happen. The slippery slope argument is a false one." Well, folks, we're seeing that, and it's dangerous. It's the opposite of what should be a legislator's objective should be to provide opportunity and hope in the midst of challenges, not simply a final solution for people that are desperate in a desperate situation. So that's on C7. So there's a whole bunch of questions about firearms. And I know I talked about this a little bit before, so I won't spend a lot more time. I stood up very clearly and made my position known. Law-abiding firearms owners are not the problem, and it is so frustrating that that is the case. That the Liberals are bringing forward the OIC last year, Bill C-21, and then the opposite of what needs to be done in Bill C-22. And Conservatives are committed. And if we have the honor of forming government, we will repeal those things, because law-abiding firearms owners deserve respect. They are not the people committing crimes in this country, and it is a shame that they're being targeted by an ideological Liberal government that is I think just desperate to cover up their own failures. We're going to keep fighting against that. I know there's also some court cases, and when I look out and say court cases, there's actually the Supreme Court. I can see out my window. There are court cases that are currently ongoing that are challenging some of the merits of this as well. And although I won't comment specifically on those, I've seen some of the arguments, and it seems like they make a good case. And certainly I will be following those things closely. So a couple of comments about Derek Sloan and his removal from caucus. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I understand that there's frustration and some disappointment. But I think it comes down to simply this. A political party is a team, and we need to be able to play as a team. We need to be able to operate as a team. And although there's things that I will disagree with, and there's things that I will agree with. In fact, there's no political party. Brad Wall used to say this often, that you need to focus on the things you agree with. And in many ways, Conservatives agree on kind of the big fundamentals: small government, accountability, respecting the rule of law, fiscal responsibility. Those are a few of the core tenets of what makes it personal responsibility, freedom. Just a few things that are coming to mind. Those are the core tenets of what makes a conservative a conservative. We'll disagree on various aspects of a lot of things, and that's good. That's called discourse. That's called dialogue. But we have to be team players at the end of the day. And it's unfortunate. I've worked with Derek, and I will still work with him, as he is still an MP. But what was made very, very clear is that he wasn't interested in being a team player, and it's unfortunate that things went the way that they did. However, it's time to focus on the real challenge at hand, and that's being a strong conservative voice for Canadians that is desperately needed when we are faced with the incompetence and unethical and ideological ways of a Liberal government that needs to be replaced. And we have to have a team that is solely focused not on personal political agendas. This isn't about any one person being the center of the story. It is about ensuring that we put Canadians first, and that is absolutely what needs to happen. And then a lot of questions about Pierre Poilievre, and I understand when Aaron did a shadow cabinet shuffle, a lot of people were like, wow, why did Pierre get shuffled out of finance? He's so good. He takes the Liberals to task on everything, and people respect him, and rightfully so. Pierre is a valued part of our team and is a big team player. But what is interesting is that, as I've talked with Pierre has said time and time again that it is so important that we focus on jobs. The winning issue in the next election, folks, is jobs. That is absolutely important that that be our priority. And folks, that's what Pierre has the opportunity to talk about now. And I had somebody that had reached out, and if they're on the call, it's I won't say their name, but they said, look, why would Aaron O'Toole demote him? And I said, look, he wasn't demoted. Full stop. He was not demoted. And I said, well, how can you say that? From finance to this other portfolio that never heard of before. Say, okay, well, just look at last week, and at this point, it had been the week after. And Pierre led question period, I believe, 2 days that week, and was front and center in committee because Pierre gets to talk about the winning issue in the next election. That's jobs. And he's now the Shadow Minister of Jobs and Industry, and is still a core part of the team. And I'll tell you, Pierre is like all of us on the Conservative team, focused on ensuring that we defeat Justin Trudeau's tired, corrupt Liberal government. So appreciate that, and I value these opportunities, folks, because it gives me a chance to address some of these very, very important issues. So Gordon asks, in previous elections, the media has highlighted positions of social conservatives, and especially those with a single issue around abortion. And how will you satisfy members that call themselves social conservatives but don't want abortion to dominate all debates and media questions? I think it's interesting. There is a wide variety of opinions on the matter. I'm personally pro-life. And probably those of you who didn't know that probably caught that from the way that I talked about Bill C7. But what's interesting is that the Conservative Party of Canada is the only party that respects the fact that there is a wide variety of opinions on all of these important issues. And I find it unbelievably hypocritical that whether it's the Liberals or the media will focus such a disproportionate amount of time on attacking certain positions on these issues, when I talk to people every single day about these sorts of things, and they want their perspectives to be heard. In fact, I've spoken with people who have left the Liberal Party simply because Justin Trudeau has said that there's no place in their party for those who have a pro-life perspective. That's not democracy, folks. That's not Canada. And it is frustrating that hypocrisy is allowed to thrive in the national narrative. Aaron has made it very, very clear that when it comes to issues of conscience, like abortion, like MAID, and other issues, that it is up to each individual MP, and they're representing their constituents and their moral values, what they were elected to do, to make those decisions. And that's the way that democracy operates, folks. And certainly Aaron has spent a lot of time defending that. And it's funny, the media tried to trap him on a few of those things, but Aaron simply answered honestly, shared his personal opinions, but said, look, the Conservative Party is a party of freedom, and he's not going to limit that freedom. And I think that emphasizing that we are the only party where people that have those divergent, in many cases, divergent opinions on those matters, where we can come and actually have a dialogue and make decisions that are in the best interests of Canada. Certainly, I'm proud to be a pro-life member of Parliament, but I'll tell you, it's so important that we have a dialogue and discussion around these important issues. So Gordon also asks about will an east-west corridor be fleshed out so the west can transport oil and gas through Quebec to get to Atlantic provinces to offset oil from foreign countries like Saudi Arabia, and provide a corridor so Quebec could get power to the west? Gordon, great idea. You've pretty much written there what one of our major platform commitments from the last election was. And And it is absolutely important. Canada has a national opportunity to ensure that our strengths, for example, oil and gas in the West, and Quebec is a huge exporter of power and hydro, that we can benefit as a nation, not as one region or another region, but as an entire nation. And it's unfortunate that there are efforts against that. And you know, I found that the hypocrisy was laid bare on this issue as liberals and other left-leaning parties are in a position now where there's questions about energy security. So a lot of you will know about Keystone XL Pipeline and the fact that it was canceled by the Biden administration, and how disappointed and infuriated, quite frankly, I was. And I stood up in the House of Commons and defended those jobs, 1,000 of which were lost already in Battle River Crowfoot, more than 1,000. But what is incredibly frustrating is, or has been exposed, is that Line 5 is a pipeline that goes from Michigan to Sarnia, Ontario, and it goes kind of across the Great Lakes corridor there. It's been operating for many decades safely. It's just gone through a whole bunch of upgrades, but all of a sudden, and I'll paraphrase here, but the Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan, he said, you know, this is different. We'll fight for Line 5. Well, I called out his hypocrisy right away, because that is ridiculous. The fact that you say you'll fight for jobs in Ontario and not in the West. So that, again, that goes back to there's not that regional respect. But basically, that is a pipeline that's responsible. It actually takes a fair amount of Alberta oil that goes to the United States and then is shipped back up into Canada. It's all the fuel that's used at the Pearson International Airport in Toronto. A lot of the fuel that's used in gasoline and diesel and whatnot is from that pipeline. And then there's refineries in Sarnia that refine that crude oil. And it's obvious that a lot of these left-leaning activists that are opposed to pipelines are suddenly seeing that, wait a second, the average Canadian actually cares about the fact that they need to be able to fill up with gas at their local gas station. Average Canadian, when we can travel more regularly again, needs to fly in a plane where it's affordable. So we're seeing that hypocrisy is being exposed. And this relates, Gordon, directly to the East-West corridor. It emphasizes how important it is that we have the conversation around ensuring energy security for our nation. And the United States needs to be a part of that conversation. You know, our economies are very, very interconnected, and that's a valuable thing. There are many, many pipelines, many hydro lines that cross back and forth between Canada and the United States already, safely, without controversy. And it is shameful that activists are leading the conversation on shutting down some of these new projects that would create economic opportunities for all involved. Interestingly, the refinery that you mentioned or that, Gordon, you're probably thinking about in the Maritimes, when Alberta Oil really dipped down low there last year, that refinery started purchasing Alberta crude. Get this, goes on the old Trans Mountain pipeline out to the West Coast. Has to go all the way down the coast of the United States, through the Panama Canal, Gulf of Mexico, back up the eastern seaboard and to the Maritimes. Folks, that's ridiculous. There should be not one Canadian that's opposed to an east-west pipeline in this country. It makes sense, and a national energy corridor I thought was a great policy from the last election, and sort of national leadership that we need. Okay. Thanks for that. Dana asks a question about, I'd like to see the number of MP seats based on provinces, contribution to the GDP. And as for Justin having a minority government, why is he doing whatever the heck he wants? Example, gun control and toy guns. And I'll get to that. Has he lost his marbles? The WE scandal is another, and why is he able to skate around the issue? I'll tell you. So there's a few issues there, and I'll try to get to all of them. And I'd hope that this would be about an hour, so I'm going a little bit over that. I hope that's okay. I'll try to answer some of these questions quickly here, folks. I apologize that this will go a little bit longer than an hour. If you have to log off, totally understand. I won't be offended. So the WE charity scandal. He's not going to escape justice on that. Conservatives are still hard at work getting answers, and we're not going to stop. In fact, there's been new revelations about some of the WE-related activities, and the ethics commissioner has an ongoing investigation. The RCMP are investigating. Conservatives will not stand for the sort of corruption that was demonstrated in the WE charity scandal. So don't worry, the Prime Minister won't get away with that. And the security just came to the door. They come by every day at 10 o'clock at night. It's only 8 o'clock in Alberta though, so I'm quite often still in my office in the evening. So that the WE scam issue, it's not done. We're going to keep working to get answers on that. And if you haven't looked at what Michael Barrett, he's a Conservative MP from Ontario, he's our Shadow Minister of Ethics, doing great work on that. Gun control and toy guns. C21, I talked a bit about that, and there's a whole bunch of problematic parts of the bill. Because you brought it up, Dana, I'll address this a little bit. Basically, not only does it punish law-abiding firearms owners, it also has some very ambiguous wording about replica firearms, regardless of the capacity or velocity of what it fires. So paintball, airsoft, pellet guns, if they look bad, they'll be banned. I think that's absurd. It shows that the Liberals truly don't care about public safety if they're going to be banning they're more concerned about banning airsoft guns, but they vote against actually strengthening penalties for those who commit crimes with illegal smuggled weapons. I tend to agree with you, Dana. Maybe the Prime Minister has lost his marbles. So based on the number of seats, based on provinces' contribution to the GDP, that's a really interesting thought, actually. I think that what the regional balance for our country was meant to be. The House of Commons was meant to be representation based on population. Constituencies that approximately have the same number, and that's kind of how it works, although there needs to be some changes. And it's something that as somebody who's passionate about making sure that Alberta is effectively represented, I'm looking into a lot of this stuff. So my on the democratic reform side of things, my I guess tagline is stay tuned. Lots more to come. But basically, the House of Commons was meant to be that representation based on population. So in Canada, about 100,000 per seat in the House of Commons. Now that's it. There's a few differences there, which there's a few reasons for that. But basically, that kind of happens. I would suggest, and this is my personal opinion, that needs to be reformed so that it more accurately represents the definite realities of population change. For example, Alberta has grown quite quickly. It's not the only jurisdiction that the population has grown quickly, but it certainly has grown faster generally than the rest of the country. And unfortunately, that's not always well represented in the number of seats that we have. We could have, if it was based on an equitable understanding of seats, we could have up to 7 or 8 more seats here in Alberta. And actually, the provincial government's Fair Deal panel talked a little bit about that. So that's something that certainly is a personal interest of mine, and something that Conservatives have talked about. Now, so that's the House of Commons. Now we have a bicameral, is the technical word, but basically the House of Commons, which was meant to be that, and then there's the Senate, which was meant to be where regions were represented. And when the country was first created, it was basically there were three regions at the time. There was Upper Canada, Lower Canada, and the Maritimes. And at the time, they had although it was 4 provinces and then PEI joined a short time later, basically equal representation in the Senate. Now, the Conservative Party policy talks about something referred to as the Triple E Senate, and that's where there's equal representation for every province. And personally, I think that's a great idea. It would ensure a level of equity regardless of population across the country. That would be a very effective way to ensure that jurisdictions that may have that economic output but less population, to make sure that they're more fairly represented in one of Canada's houses of parliament. So lots more to come on that. And it's a personal interest, because I believe that democracy is something that needs to be protected, needs to be sustained and taken very, very seriously, and is a solution, I think, to a lot of the challenges regarding Western alienation. Okay, I'm going to try to get through a couple more of the questions here, folks. I apologize. There's some great questions, so thank you all. Let me thank everybody for joining here. I appreciate this very much. So question by Lori about if you don't believe Alberta should separate, please enlighten us as to how we can have any impact on the control of Canada. Election outcomes are known before our polls even close, and we have zero say whether it's a Conservative or Liberal government. Pandering to the East is necessary to keep in power, and neither party will do anything for the West. And what could you do as an MP to get a pipeline built to the East? So there's a few things in there. I think I've addressed the pipeline issue, you know, Conservatives have made it very, very clear. In fact, when Conservatives were in power, we saw 4 major pipelines built in this country, and there were 5 more major pipeline projects that were somewhere in the review process, and in a couple of cases were ready to go, like had started construction, waiting for the final approvals. So I think a big part of the problem here, Lori, and to those others on the call, is not that Canada's broken. It's that we have a government that is not respecting what Canada was meant to be. And you know, it's the same thing when it comes to, like I talked initially about the fact that our federation was built to respect regional differences. Resources are provincial jurisdiction. Full stop. Ottawa should not have a say in how a province develops its resources. And it is a national shame, the fault of an ideological government. So this is less about Canada's faults and more about the Liberals' faults, because when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, he respected those differences and allowed provinces to do what was best in their jurisdictions and respected those sorts of things. So Lori, thank you for that question, because it's important that we get down to the root of the problem. The frustration that we face now are symptoms of the incompetence and corruption of a government that is more interested about their power, more about making sure that they grip onto power and that their friends are rewarded, than they are about a nation. And that's why Conservative governments, like under Stephen Harper, saw a level of respect for provinces, even though they may have disagreed with the politics. You think about Kathleen Wynne, the former Premier of Ontario, and Stephen Harper. I can guarantee they didn't necessarily agree with each other, but Stephen Harper knew that Kathleen Wynne was elected in Ontario and respected that. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau cares more about politics than being a leader. And that's the real problem. So a lot of these challenges are symptoms of the bigger issue. And there, in fact, Justin Trudeau was quoted years ago. There's an interview where he says, Alberta has too much power. So it's interesting because now he wants to silence Alberta and those who are opposed to him there, and will do every means necessary to do so. But that again speaks to less about the challenges of Canada, because we have quite a few seats. In fact, and as we're kind of strategizing about the next election, we need to win more seats in every jurisdiction of the province. In the prairies, we need to win a few more seats in Manitoba. We need to win a few more seats in BC. We need to win a few more seats in Ontario, and Quebec, and the Maritimes. So it's about making sure that there's a government that knows its business, and that's doing what the federal government is responsible for and letting provinces deal with what's their jurisdiction, and then ensure that all Canadians can prosper. When Albertans prosper, Canadians prosper. When Ontarians prosper, Canadians prosper. When Quebecers prosper, Canada prospers. So we need a government that is not focused on itself and its own image, but on ensuring that Canada is empowered to do what Canada was meant to do. And it is a shame that the Liberals are so blind to the destructive nature of their policies and how it's tearing our country apart. That is a national shame. Okay, thank you, Laurie, for those questions. So will you, from Gordon, will you reintroduce once elected the bills that the Liberals repealed, addressing accountability for Aboriginal leaders and ensuring that there is scrutiny over the in reserves? I don't know exactly what the status of that is. I know that MPs are involved. Various MPs are involved in ensuring that the next election platform is being compiled. We could be facing an election in the coming months, quite frankly. That's kind of what we, and I see that there's an election question in a couple of moments here, but you touch on an important point, and that's just accountability and making and keeping promises. And today the Liberals announced that once again they were unable to fulfill their 2015 election promise about ending drinking water advisories on reserves. And it's a shame that there are reserves in this country that don't have access. And it's not just about drilling a new well. Like they're more significant issues. In some cases, there's major infrastructure deficits that need to be addressed. In some cases, there's leaching from industrial processes that are affecting reserves. So a whole host of issues. The Liberals have once again failed. They made some big promises, big press releases. This is their MO, so to speak. Make big promises but fail to deliver. All style, no substance. And it's key that government is able to not just make big announcements, but actually deliver on their promises and ensure that there's integrity and accountability in the way that they govern. And something that I talked a lot about during the election as well is the idea of good governance, understanding what government is responsible for and ensuring that it's accomplished in a way that respects Canadians and is absolutely key. Okay, so another question about extreme political correctness and where free speech is frowned upon and where there's not the ability to debate differing viewpoints, and those opposing are being called things like racist. Big issue, and it's troubling that instead of and this is the case, like for example, I talked about C7. The Liberals, instead of wanting to debate an important subject, literally life or death, they will just call the Conservatives names. When Conservatives regarding the COVID situation more than a year ago started saying, where is the preventative action? We were called racists. And the Liberals didn't take us seriously. We believed at the time, and still do believe, that had we taken early action, we could have avoided a lot of the challenges that we face now. And time again, that sort of thing happens. Really, it's a cop-out. They want to ditch responsibility, so instead they simply will call you the tagline of the day, and it's unfortunate. We need to have respectful dialogue in our nation to ensure that we can address the challenges that Canadians face. And it is unfortunate that cancel culture and the extreme political correctness, where you're more worried about the way somebody says something than the substance of what they're saying. And now it's not to say that you're it shouldn't be respectful and shouldn't acknowledge some of the difficult things maybe about our past or whatever the case is, but the reality is that we have to be able to have honest and open dialogue in our country. That's the basis of democracy, and it is a shame that is being trampled on, whether it's in the media, whether it's in political discourse, and certainly I've experienced that myself. Being a rural MP, there are some people that think that I shouldn't necessarily have the voice. Well, I'm quick to remind them that that each MP has the honor of occupying one seat in the House of Commons, and that's what democracy is about. Every person in our country, every citizen gets one vote. One vote. That's key. That's what democracy is about. Every constituency elects a member of parliament. And then, you know what, and this is the cool thing about our democratic system. And at some point, maybe I'll do as I'm thinking about this, maybe I'll do like a democracy, democratic reform focused webinar town hall. That might be a neat idea. So I'm thinking about future ideas as we've kind of done this experimental town hall here tonight. And I appreciate everybody who's joined. But every MP occupies the same number of seats in the House of Commons. So the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, every MP from every corner of our country has one seat in the House of Commons. Now there's political parties and a level of organization, and there's cabinet and the speaker and a whole bunch of other dynamics. But ultimately it comes down to, as myself having the honor to represent the people of Battle River Crowfoot, I get to be your voice there, only because the people of Battle River Crowfoot put their confidence in me in the 43rd Parliament. That's the strength of our democracy, folks. Every person gets one vote, and then those representatives from across the country occupy one seat. And it's that basis which is absolutely key. And we should be able to have the difficult conversations. We should be able to enjoy that freedom. There's something called parliamentary privilege. And it's a neat concept, because basically it means that MPs can't be sued for saying things within the House of Commons. Now, I'm sure that there's people. In fact, I've read about examples where people have abused that tool for their own personal gain and whatnot. That's unfortunate. Politicians should be held to a higher account, and I know in a few of those cases that I've read about, come the next election, they were held to account. But when it comes down to it, the reason why parliamentary privilege exists is because you have to be able to be honest. So back in the day when the Magna Carta was being enacted in England about 800 years ago, it was because they needed to ensure that the king couldn't punish politicians for speaking their mind. So parliamentary privilege, the idea was born that you had to have the ability to have a voice. So last question here, folks. Thanks to all of you for tuning in tonight. Really appreciate it. Grace asked the questions about voting machines and the next election, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit, Grace, just about Bill C-19 and some of the challenges that are faced. Canada has generally a very strong electoral system and process. It's simple. It's very different than the United States. And I know I've talked to a lot of people about concerns about what happened in the United States in the last election. Canada's system is very different. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And I'd be happy to get into that at some point. But we have a very strong system with integrity, a lot of accountability that's been built up over time. Now, it doesn't mean that it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that there's not examples. For example, in the last election, there were a lot of voter ID cards that can be used for identification to vote that were sent to non-citizens. That's an issue, and something that Conservatives actually caught, made Elections Canada aware of it, and in most cases that was dealt with. And there will be those that try and cheat the system, and it's unfortunate, and they need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Canada does not, in national federal elections, use voting machines. Part of the reason for that is our ballots are really simple. It's an X or a check mark on, with just a few options. Unlike ballots, for example, in the United States, where you could have 10, 20, 60 I've seen some examples of American ballots that have like 60 or 70 different options between voter initiatives and in some cases electing your local dog catcher and waste management coordinator and sheriff and mayor and state congressman, state senator, senator, congressman, and then president, vice president. Like there's a whole bunch of different positions. So very, very different. Now there are some concerns that Conservatives have regarding the Liberals' proposed changes, and that's why we're debating it. We believe that Canadians need to be able to trust their election process. In fact, we see right now some real challenges with the COVID dynamics, with the election the provincial election in Newfoundland, how they kind of canceled it and then it's kind of going and to be honest, I haven't checked in the last few days, but there is still a lot of uncertainty there. Canadians deserve better than that. So Conservatives are making sure that we are ensuring that ultimately Canadians are respected. Elections and ensuring integrity in the process is not a political issue. And it's frustrating the Liberals will try and make it one, because it's ultimately about respecting you folks on the call. It's about respecting every single Canadian. And that's not partisan politics. That's called democracy. And certainly there's a whole host of issues, but when it comes to voting machines, they're not used in Canada. There's a whole bunch of further discussion to be had on the some of the changes that have been proposed and ensuring that ultimately Canadians' votes count, matter, and that they can trust the results. And it's not about, see, this is what I think is sometimes most frustrating for me as somebody who has a great deal of respect for democracy. That when you have a particular political party or person that tries to manipulate the process for their political gain, the basis of Western democracy is built on the idea of trust. Citizens have to be able to trust their systems. And that's why there's so many issues about when Justin Trudeau tried to interfere in the SNC Lavalin affair and with the judicial process and a whole host of other issues related with that. Canadians need to be able to trust the systems that are put in place because they only work when Canadians trust in them. And it's unfortunate that some of these issues are politicized when really it should be about ensuring that the Canadians simply have a voice. And if that means Canadians choose somebody else, you know what? That's okay, because Canadians get to make the call. And certainly Conservatives respect democracy, respect the fact that Canadians need to have their voices heard. So folks, I've gone over time. My communications assistant is going to be totally not surprised that I told her that I'd be done in less than an hour, and I'm now about an hour and 23 minutes. But let me say thank you. This has been a really good opportunity to kind of test out this process. Just a couple of observations that next time I'll try to bring some people on to ask their questions live. I think that would be great to be able to do. This was a learning experience, so appreciate all of you bearing with us as we learn some of these new technological things. But I do appreciate the fact that we were able to have this conversation. And thank you to those of you who stuck in right to the end, and for those who I think are watching on Facebook, appreciate the fact that we could have this dialogue. So thank you, and look forward to continuing to have these important conversations. That's what democracy is about. That's what I take very, very seriously as your member of Parliament, and will continue to do everything I can to ensure that you, that beautiful 53,000 kilometers of East Central Alberta real estate, of which, if you look on my wall, I've got a couple of great pictures there. Just put those up a couple of weeks ago. Super excited. A couple of those came in from the photo challenge that I had last year. But it's an honor to represent that 53,000 square kilometers of East Central Alberta. And please, just because I'm about to sign off on the call, doesn't mean that the conversation stops. So you can reach out to me. damien.currick@parle.gc.ca. Follow me on social media at dccurrick. You can text me at 403-575-5625 or call at 1-800-665-4358. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you everybody so much for joining. Hope that this was helpful and appreciate everybody who asked questions, and look forward to being able to do this again and getting some of you on live for questions next time, and maybe having a themed town hall with some other great members of the Conservative team from across the country. So with that, I will sign off. Have a great evening. It's 10:30 here in the capital, so I'm going to be wrapping up a couple of things before I call it a night. Thanks everybody. All the best.